It was. Yeah, that was a very long contract. Because I think it was after that we ended up moving. Did I go to? No, that was when I met. I got on. It'd been like a 6.5 month contract
It was
for both of us.
Yep.
And I got onto the plane. I got my sandwich. I had my bag. I was headed home. I was so tired. And I got on the plane, and there was an older lady behind me, and she's like, "Are you from the Bean Dam?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I'm from the Rhine Dam." "Are you from the Bean Dam?" "No, ma'am, I'm from the Rhine Dam." And she did it like 4 more times, and finally I was like, "No!" And she was like, "Well, you just had to say that." And I was like, 6 months.
That was a long one, because I remember I'd gone home. I was supposed to be home for Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. And then the replacement, who was my fill from that ship, had gotten married, and then they didn't bring him back. And so I was home for maybe 10 days and then went to the Rhine Dam and I was home for Thanksgiving, but then I worked the Christmas cruise, the New Year's cruise. And that New Year's cruise was the one where the food and beverage manager had gotten offloaded with a bad back in Cozumel. And the guy that came on to replace him was a British guy. And when it came time for the New Year's decorations, he'd never got them unloaded. And the guy who got disembarked didn't order them and have them loaded. So the hotel manager had this whole concept of New Year's decorations the decorations were already going to be like on the floor. Like all the confetti was all over the tables. Do you remember this? It was just going to be the party this is like the after party look. And, but yet we didn't have the stuff to do it. And so when the F&B manager came and said, "Yvette, we got nothing," I was like, "Oh my gosh, you'd be kidding me." So we went down the store when we did a black and white ball that year for New Year's, which is again, not what was planned. Even the ball drop net for the balloons in the main showroom, that wasn't even on board. So they had to use a pool net, which was hanging down in the sight line of the balcony passengers to watch the show, which we had to adjust. I'm in my gown on a ladder prior to a captain's cocktail party, trying to help the sailors do that. And then I remember that day we were in Jamaica, and that was the day, because we had to do all the decorating, and the chief electrician had offloaded the engine for the Genie. So like trying to decorate up 2 decks was literally impossible. I remember saying to him, "You better make something happen, because we need to have the decorate. It's New Year's Eve. Like, we cannot just, it's hard enough as it is, but this is even harder. Why would you give well, they needed it." Well, of course they needed the motor, because they're doing the same thing that we are right now. And through all the midst of it, I get called down to the infirmary to do a drug test. I'm like,
"Oh my God.
I
don't have time to do drugs, let alone do the test."
All the time. "Oh, but we're in Jamaica. Did you check my crew card? I didn't even go ashore."
Yeah.
But I remember in 12:01, the captain had rung the bell for midnight, and I was sitting on the floor backstage in my white gown, my black and white gown, just sitting there, just drinking out of the bottle of champagne.
And I'm sure it was the really good stuff.
It was. I don't think I cared at that moment.
No, I'm pretty sure you didn't. Probably
the $1 a bottle, stuff. But oh my God, that was a New Year's that was unbelievable.
We had the best holidays, though.
We had great holidays. We really.
I mean, it was always hard because you were away from family, but we were with our ship family.
Exactly. It was always good. So if you have, do you have any, since you were a social hostess, do you have any captain's table memories that really stand out for you? That, whether good, bad, happy, sad, doesn't matter.
Oh, I loved, it's funny because you learn some great skills being the hostess at a captain's table. Mm-hmm. And you got to know your captain so well. So you could signal them that the waiter was behind them, or you could tell whenever they were uncomfortable because they're next to the lady who's goosing them under the table, or doing any other number of things, or the man that's got bad breath and he's spitting in his face. You could tell because you got to know them so well. And just learning how to keep a table flowing was such an amazing skill to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to draw the people out that wouldn't necessarily draw out otherwise.
Yeah.
You had some tables, like I think you talked about with Tanya, flowed so easily.
Yeah.
And those are probably still the passengers we're still friends with.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just fun. But then there were the tables that were a lot more difficult, and you were asking them about their favorite shoe size or color because you're trying to find anything to talk about and anything to have in common. But probably my favorite captain story wasn't at the table. It was more introductions when they still did them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was introducing for Captain Mercer. And he used to get goosed more than any other captain I knew. Like, I don't know whether it was his British accent or what, but I'd be introducing him and he'd be like, come straighten my tie. And I'd straighten his tie. He's like, so-and-so's 2 down. She's going to pinch my backside. And so you'd have to try to move them along so that didn't happen. And trying to explain to people what a hostess was always interesting to people on land now.
Yeah. What do you do? What do you do? You know, don't you, I think that job went away, with that role went away after I left ships. So was that role when you were cruise director, because you stayed after I left, you were still with Holland America. Was that role still in effect when you were?
It was phasing out. If I had a hostess, it wasn't for long.
Okay.
It was phasing out. And I think I ended up pulling that role more than.
Oh, you're a female cruise director, so you'll wear 2 hats. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Or I'd grab a female cruise staff and be like, your introductions tonight. And
the intro is that for like the captain's cocktail party where you would stand there with the captain and the hotel manager or hotel director and introduce
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, may I present Captain so-and-so and your hotel manager. Yeah. And usher them in with their champagne.
Cheap champagne.
Cheap champagne. Definitely. Le duck vomit, I think we called it.
So were you a social hostess that wore gloves?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Depended on the gown.
Mm-hmm.
But I was never, they used to bug me.
Yeah. I just when I first started doing the job, so my very first ship that I was ever hired for, the Sea Breeze, I was the social hostess, and back then I didn't wear gloves. But as time went on and I became more germ conscious and watched people with their hands and things that they did with their hands, then I began to become, I'm not paranoid, I won't say that, but I started wearing gloves on the captain's cocktail party night because I didn't want to shake hands with people, or I'd stand with my hands behind my back and just kind of, nod and bow to people and not shake hands, because some have fluffy hands, some have sweaty hands, some were just doing something with their hands that I don't know about.
There was a lot of that. I think you taught me to always stand with my hands behind my back.
Yeah.
Do you remember the lean?
Yes.
I've taught that lean to a lot of people because whenever it's a close talker, whenever you have a close talker, there's not a whole lot you can do except for you plant your feet, you bevel, and you move this foot out further and you lean back so that they can't get past that front foot, and you have the space and they can't close talk you. It's a wonderfully useful trait.
I remember one hotel director who is still alive, so I won't mention his name here, but we're still friends at this stage of the game, but I still want to mention his name. But he used to wear his glasses. He didn't need glasses back then, except for computer work, but he always wore his glasses to introductions. And so finally one day I asked him why he only wore his glasses for that. And he takes his glasses off and he hands them to me. He says, look at them. And I look at them and there's just, they're peppered, speckled with like peanut juice.
Oh.
And this is why I wear them. They're like mini spit guards.
That's brilliant.
Very, very smart. But just the things you have to do when you work with the public in that capacity, because you don't want to insult anybody, obviously, but those little things you have to, ebb and flow with.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Oh,
I remember being on the first ship that was quarantined with Norwalk virus.
oh really?
Mm-hmm.
What was
I
that?
was assistant cruise director with Linda Konarski, and she had trained me, or she was training me to take over on the Statendam. And the Norwalk outbreak was happening on all of the ships. And of course it was terrifying, and ships were getting blamed for everything. And they made the decision to quarantine the Zaandam in Vancouver for a solid week and do the deep clean. And it was, passengers were angry getting off because they were sick. And I watched the Statendam sail out, and I was supposed to be on that. I was taking over for Carla.
Oh.
And I think it was Carla. And I remember then that night, that was the night that the Statendam had an engine fire and had to be tugged back into Vancouver. And there was a cartoon in Vancouver for the newspaper, and it had people getting off the Statendam, and there was a placard that said, "We didn't even have a chance to get the Norwalk virus."
Oh my gosh.
And I think I still have that one too. But I remember asking her experience of going through a fire in the engine room. And she was doing the open welcome aboard presentation, and she heard the alarm go off, and she looked up at the light tech, and she was like, "Can you call the bridge and find out?" And he was like, "On it." And he called the bridge, and it was a real fire, and she had to be up there to make announcements. So he just went, curtain went down. She took off. The assistant took over for the welcome aboard, and she was on the bridge with the captain as they were sitting there dead in the water in the middle of Seymour Narrows.
Oh my gosh. That's not a good place to be dead in the water either.
No, it isn't. Yeah. It isn't. But I remember we cleaned every pen, every paper clip, every surface. Everything had to be deep cleaned again, and then fogged.
Yep.
To get it was, and people were saying they were afraid to take cruises. I'm like, this is the time to take a cruise, because it is cleaner than any other place in the entire universe.
Well, if people just wash their hands,
yes,
they wouldn't have gotten Norwalk. I mean, in all the years I worked on ships, and I've been in the industry for 20 years, and I never, ever got Norwalk.
No, I didn't either. I didn't either.
So cautious. And, it's funny you mentioned the Statendam. I have so many memories of the Statendam because I spent many a contract on that ship. And the Statendam I was on in Alaska when the CDC had called corporate to let them know that there were a group of people coming to the ship, because back then we would come into Juneau, and then we, hundreds of passengers would get off and do the overland tour, and then hundreds would come on. So it was that mid-cruise embarkation. So CDC had notified the company that these people were coming with some kind of gastrointestinal issue. And there wasn't just like one or two people, it was like 200 people, then that might be an exaggeration, but it was still a significant amount. And giving the company right of refusal to not let the passengers embark because they didn't know what this thing was. It hadn't been identified yet as a Norwalk. It was just GI. So they came on board, and then it started. I mean, the crew got it, and then from the crew, then the passengers next week got it, and it just was this perpetual thing. And that was the start of Norwalk on cruise ships. And then interesting, years later, because you mentioned the Zaandam being, shuttered in Vancouver for a week, I was on a celebrity ship. And this was the reason why I had to leave working ships, was because of the fogging. But we just could not get rid of Norwalk. They did everything. And as crew members in Fort Lauderdale, the city would not allow us to get off. We were not allowed on turnaround days. We could go off on the pier, and that was it.
Yeah.
So the crew, we fogged all cabins. We fogged all areas. And that's when they first started to introduce that little piece of paper that said, if you've had diarrhea or vomiting or a fever in the past 72, 48 hours, whatever that is, I can't recall. But if you had that, please declare it here. Mm-hmm. And all passengers had to fill this out, before they even got on the ship. And I remember I was on the gangway, just kind of watching the guests come on board. And I was port lecturer at this point. And this man walks up the gangway. He's on the jetway. He hasn't even gotten his toes on the ship yet. Okay. And as he's just about to step on, he throws up. So the hazmat suits come out. They descend on the man, full hazmat suits. They scoop him up, get him, back down the jetway, close it down, clean it up, disinfect it. And then they pulled his form, and he had lied and said that he was, symptom free, when in reality he was not symptom free. And at that time, it was so serious that security was putting tape across people who were in quarantine in their cabin. They would tape the doors because passengers would leave their cabins and go to the dining room because they were tired of eating rice and chicken broth,
Right. Right.
So it was really, from the acceleration of it, from a guest point of view, is it sucks. But at the same time, when you're contagious, you can pass this on to other people, and it becomes a financial burden on the cruise line, who's not even technically at fault. It's because people were being truthful on their forms in the first place and still coming on sick. So, but yeah, they blame the cruise lines for everything. I
wonder what will happen with COVID and the forms, how the forms are going to change, because they're going to change.
Yeah, they will.
And they will be, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't start taking temperatures of passengers getting on.
If they were smart, they would.
It's going to definitely, this will change the face of a lot of things, but I think it'll definitely change the face of cruising.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So from having been a crew member, and a very important crew member for the cruise director, it typically is the spokesperson for the entire ship. When you watch the media and you see what's going on and what the media reports are, do you have any opinion of what you think, how the media has handled the stuff with the cruise ships, and just for your overall?
I don't understand it. I think the cruise ships have done a tremendous job of dealing with a horrible situation, and just following even Captain Mercer's blog. I don't know if he has a blog for the World Cruise.
No, I don't.
And they had to offload all of their World Cruise passengers in Australia because all the ports shut down. They weren't allowing any cruise ships in to any of the ports anymore. So they offloaded all their passengers and had to cut the World Cruise short. And now they're sailing back to Florida via all different kinds of places. But they had to basically bob around for 2 weeks before they could get into Singapore to get fuel, because that's their quarantine period. Then they have to spend another 2 weeks before they can go to Indonesia to offload a bunch of crew. And I know that it's easy for the news media to say the cruise lines aren't handling it well, or they're not letting crew off, or but they're doing the best that they can do. They've moved crew to passenger cabins so that they've all got windows and more room. They're doing events nightly for the crew with social distancing in place. They're taking the time to clean and maintain things that they hadn't. I think it's just easy for the media to sensationalize it.
Yeah, and to point fingers when they don't really know the inside stories of the efforts. I'm wondering, so what ship is he on then that's doing the World Cruise?
I don't remember. I want to say it's the New Amsterdam.
Okay.
I could be wrong though. I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'll send you the blog link.
Yeah, please. I'd like to read it, because I always liked working with Jonathan. He was a great social captain. He was easy to work with. So easy to work with. So,
he was.
Yeah.
There were some that weren't always as easy.
No, they weren't always so easy or affable or entertaining.
But Captain Mercer was always so personable with them.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to work with Captain Torre Laura?
No. Uh-uh.
He was Norwegian, and he was fun. He was a fun captain. I have a troll downstairs. Hey, Joe, run and grab my troll.
Okay.
And I still have it because when he retired, he gave it to me. He said it was to ward off evil. It was a Norwegian troll to ward off evil spirits.
Oh, nice.
And negativity. And when he first retired, he gave it to me, and I was still working. And the deck would steal it from me. They would come and troll nap him, and then they would send me ransom pictures with and so when I retired, I was like, well, maybe I should pass it along to somebody else. And I was like, no, he gave it to me.
It was meant for you. It was meant for you.
A little selfish and decided to bring him home. And he sits here and he looks over my front door and makes sure that no evil spirits or negativity comes in. He's definitely worthy of warding off evil spirits.
I can see why he would scare the evil spirits away.
I have a friend of mine who hates this troll. She's like, he's scary. And I'm like, well, that's his job.
That's his job. He's supposed to be scary.
Yes. So he's my Norwegian troll.
I like him. He's quite big. And he stands up on his own, or does you have to have him propped on something?
No, he stands up on his own. He has his.
Oh, nice shoes. Okay.
He's actually quite sizable.
Yeah, he is quite sizable. He's like, what, almost 2 feet tall.
Yeah.
He looks really ugly.
He is really ugly. Yeah.
Well, guess what? I think he's ugly with a little beer belly.
He does have a bit of a beer belly.
He needs a haircut too.
He does. I won't get his hair either.
Did you ever work with Captain Van Villiau?
Yes, I did. I don't remember which ship. And I couldn't necessarily tell you what he looks like, but I do remember working with him.
He looks like Santa.
Okay.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite captains ever to work with. And he was such an entertaining captain, and he was talk about being affable and such a great sense of humor. And he had these twinkly blue eyes, and he had the white beard. And so whenever his wife sailed with him, she obviously would host tables with him. But I would still do the introductions at the cocktail party as normal. And we had this signal system that whenever the guests who were going to be at the table with us were coming through, I was to scratch the palm of his hand. So I was taking my index finger and scratch his right palm just to let him. And so he would personalize. Oh, I'm so looking forward to having dinner with you. And our little sign that we had. And hosting tables with him was such a delight. It was amazing. And he didn't do massive tables. He liked having small, intimate tables. And the one that stands out for me, and this is again prior to when things had gotten so technical with, the drinking and, the rules have gotten a lot tighter. So that's my precursor to what I'm going to share. So we have this amazing table, and it just so happens that the maitre d' had invited people that were from my hometown of York, Pennsylvania. And so throughout dinner, I come to find out that the woman sitting down from me, she works for my orthodontist. So Dr. Pavlik, and it was just like, how does that ever happen? Obviously. So here it is. Like, she goes, oh, well, your teeth turned out great. I said, thank you. It's because of your orthodontist that you work for. But that night he was on fire, absolutely on fire. We closed the dining room down. The guests missed the show. So we didn't even get to the show. We had dinner with all of them. The wine kept flowing. Then it went into brandy after dinner drinks with coffee, and that kept on flowing. By the time we left the dining room, it was like, let's say 11:30 at night, 11:45. And we then, as the group, we left there and went back to the main, what bar was it in the Westerdam? It's the old Westerdam in the back of the ship where they did karaoke. So we went back with this group. What's it called?
Was it the Ocean Bar?
No, it was the dark one. It was the disco. I don't recall the name of that lounge because
that Westerdam was a strange ship because they cut it in half and they extended it. So you'd have walk and go down and go over and up.
Yep. It was a pain in the ass.
Uh-huh.
Trying to explain that same thing. Well, also on the newer dam ships, when they came out, they had the kitchen was in the middle. So you couldn't walk off out of the theater. You had to walk out, up, over, and back down. Or they would walk back to the Half Moon
Right.
rooms and whatnot. But so I don't recall the name of that bar. Maybe somebody who's watching may recall it. But we went back and did karaoke, and
Oh no, the captain doing karaoke.
is stuff he never did, it was just that he had such a great time. And he told this story. If you don't mind, I share this. It's actually really cute. So he tells the story at the table. Now, again, he's had enough wine and after dinner drinks to really let his stories flow. So he tells a story about how when his wife Meikle was on, they had some friends who sailed with them, and they're from Holland originally, and we went into St. Martin. That was one of our calls, and they took them over to Orient Beach. Now, as you know, Orient Beach is anything from clothes to clothing optional to full nudity.
Mm-hmm.
And because they had rented a car this day, they drove over, just the four of them, and they get to the beach, and it's really, really hot. So they're sitting there under a palm tree, and the friends said, well, you know what, we're hot when in Rome. So they clothes off, they head down and go for a swim. So there's the captain and his wife sitting there waiting with the cameras and the clothing. And so Han's like, well, I'm going to go and do the same thing. So clothes off and heads to the water. And he said, just as his toes hit the water, someone says, oh, Captain, can we have a picture with you? So he's like, let me get in the water first. So he tells this story.
Oh my God.
It is the first time I've heard him tell this story ever. And I've been hosting tables with him for a long time. And I was hysterical. And so were the guests. And it was just the perfect story. So we end up back at the karaoke. And they're talking. And I was like, Captain, I've never heard you tell that story before, but that's hilarious. How embarrassing. He said, oh, Yvette, I just made it up. He said, only in my dreams, only in my dreams.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, he was so awesome. He had 2 daughters who came to work on board.
Thank you for joining me for today's Captain's Table Conversations with Yvette. Stay tuned for more, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe.